Once again, since I'm working on the upper back, I want the effleurage stroke to go in a down angle. It's easier to get the stone started this way, so the stroke's going toward the head at this time. Again, the back of my hand, so she knows where the stone's coming from. And then again, when you apply the stone, you want to make sure that it has room to have an initial stroke before you draw it back. And so it's going to be done faster now, because it's a little bit warm. Now, as soon as it cools down, if you have firm enough pressure, you can slow the pace down. The pace changes with the hot stone. The pressure stays pretty constant because we're still talking about deep tissue work. Now, one of the things that you're going to want to do is change the angle of your wrist. If I work constantly with my wrist flexed and being on top of my strokes all the time, I promise you it hurts your wrist, because I know from personal experience it does. So at this time, I'm going to step back from my work a little bit, and I drop my shoulder down closer to the level of the table. And if you don't have too much oil on the body, I can still lean into my stroke and not hold back, but I've dramatically changed the angle of my wrist. Again, it's one thing you need to do to protect yourself while you're doing massage work, is to be able to change the angle of your wrist. Now, with the shape of this stone, I can rock it up on its edge, and I can do some point work. It's important whenever you do deeper work with stones to have your fingertips near the tip of the stone so you can feel through the stone better. That pressure is coming directly from my palm. So I'm not squeezing the stones with my fingertips. You squeeze them, you're going to wear your hands out. Pressure comes from the palm. Fingers just guide the stone, so it doesn't slip out of its spot. And again, once I start to feel resistance, I know not to press any harder. And I just felt the muscle let go, and so I know I can press a little bit harder now. The muscle is now relaxing. And again, I always finish up a deeper stroke with just doing a little effleurage to calm the muscle back down again. Whenever you do deep work, you have to release it slowly. If you don't, then you can put the muscle back into spasm again. Okay, now I'll be using a scapula stone. This work I want to demonstrate for you, but it's not necessary for everybody to have this work done to them. And actually, Angelica doesn't need it that much, because I'm going to work with the stone a little bit under the scapula. But in theory, we really don't need to stretch overstretched muscles. So I will do a little bit of this work just so you can see the body mechanics and how to access it. First thing I'll do is I'll take the stone out of Angelica's hand, because if I don't and I'm moving the arm around, she might drop it on my foot. So I'm going to place one hand in under the shoulder, but in a position where I can roll the humerus over. If I can roll the humerus over, the inferior angle of the scapula pops up. Then I'll take this larger stone, and I'm going to start massaging it first into the area where I know I want to apply it. Then I'll be using the finer edge of the stone and sliding it in underneath the scapula. When we're doing the deep work on the scapula, underneath the scapula, it's not pokey work. It's done with rhythm and nice and smooth. So when you find tight spots, you can hold them. Let the heat soak in and do what it's supposed to do. I believe the healing in this treatment happens when we work slow and firm with the stone, so the client's body can relax more. Now, when it's time to exit the stone from under the scapula, I just place my hand on top of the stone, press into the rhomboids, and the stone just slides out without plucking the scapula. Now, since I applied the oil to the whole back to start with, and this side hasn't been worked on yet, I am going to apply a little bit of oil to this stone. And the reason why I apply it to the stone is because if I don't, I have the tendency to apply too much oil, and then I can't control the stone. In order to control the stone, you have to have an adequate amount of oil just to turn it if it's a hot stone, and not too much so you can't change your body mechanics. Again, the back of my hand. So I apply the stone to this area, again rolling it back toward me as I'm working with it. Then as it cools down, the pace slows down. And And as this stone starts to lose its temperature, I'm going to come right back up the back with it, go down the arm, and place it in Angelica's hand. A very important component to what we're doing is the use of hot, but as well as the use of temperature being cold. So in this application, I can create or put enough heat into the body to simulate a fever. We've changed then that 98.6 place where our body likes to be. It likes to be at homeostasis. We take it out of it, it's uncomfortable with it. So in this process, we would like to pull the heat out of the body because the body soaks in heat, it does not soak in cold. When we place cold on the body, it pushes out heat. So in turn, I can release the heat from the body that we put in. Although the body strengthens from change, we just have to control how long that change is for. In other words, I work deeper than the client realizes, so I could make them sore. Cold stones are going to reduce the amount of soreness that that person might feel from the session because I've worked now deeper because they've been more relaxed. I can also, as I said before, change the core temperature of the body. I don't want a client to be nauseous getting up off the table, so I want to use cold to bring their body temperature back down again. In addition to that, if we can take the body out of its norm for a short period of time and it has to recover from it, it's only going to make it stronger, as long as the immune system is not being compromised. So in other words, I think this treatment can really be adapted to almost any condition that you might work on with just your hands. You just have to be smart about how you use temperature, introduce it gradually. You can always increase it. We can't take away what we've done. So if we made somebody sore, we made them feel nauseous, that's done. We can't take it back. Let's try not to go there with this work. When we're dissipating heat on the body, and I'm working on the lower back, I might be working in an 8 to 12 inch area. They have quite a bit of muscle density and length here to absorb that heat. All that heat's going into the palm of our hand. So we need to be able to switch hands to work with temperatures that your client are going to be able to absorb. Because across our knuckles and our palm, we have very little tissue to absorb that heat. So I like to work with hotter stones because I know it creates that hyperemia faster, so I can work deeper sooner into the muscle belly. So then that means I have to use both hands. And that's why very often I only work with one stone at a time. So then I can just flip the stone, switch it into the other hand, and the wrist is straight. Often I'll have the other hand on top to support the stroke, but there's usually one hand just turning the stone. You want that one hand turning the stone. You'll control it better, the pressure is going to be more even. And again, you lean into your strokes. Strokes do not just come from the arm. They have to come from the core of the body. If they don't, you're going to wear your body out sooner than you need to. It's very important when you're working on the body, as I stated before, not to squeeze the stone in your hand. And so when I go through this transition period where I want to switch the stone into my outside hand and then glide it up to the upper back to pull down off the upper traps, the stone is just cradled in my fingertips. If I turn it over, it's going to fall out. But we can apply it by just turning the fingers in toward the upper traps and just pinning it. Again, we pin the stone to the body, we do not hold it. And this being in the rhythm of a stroke, I don't mind releasing it from the body. But this is one of the only times that I'll do this. If you do it within the rhythm of a stroke, you can release it. You wouldn't do a stroke like this. But being that your other hand's involved, you can get away with it because it has rhythm. At this point, I can also either pull down on the upper taps to stretch them, to switch back into this hand, to continue the work on the upper back, or I come down and pull down on the upper traps, and then I can glide down into the hand. And again, now switch the stones out. Our body mechanics are very important as far as us being able to have longevity as a massage therapist. From our table height to what ailments we might have that we have to deal with. If we have a bad back, if we have bad knees, wrists, we have to figure out the best way for us as long as we can vary it. If we get stuck in one position, that's where we have problems. So you just want to take that into consideration. Evaluate what you're doing as a therapist. Look at the way you're standing. Look at the way that you're working. And then be in tune enough to be able to change it. And that's what I try to share during these workshops. Just a quick review on the 3 different ways that I like to call pinning the stone to the body. Again, we talk about pinning because we don't want to squeeze it in our hands. We did the basic effleurage stroke, which we call palming, the pressure comes from the palm of the hand. Not too far out in the fingertips because it bends the fingers back. So it has to be back in a secure place where you can apply enough pressure if the stone is hot. We talked about trailing edge. That was when I wrap my fingers and just take the shape of the stone, not squeezing it in my hand, and able to bring my wrist back to bring the trailing edge of the stone up through the erectors or any other area that I want to work deeper on as a gliding stroke. Then we also have cupping the stone. I showed that a little bit on the upper back where the pressure came from my palm. So I am taking, again, the shape of the stone. There'll be another technique, a version of cupping the stone that I'm going to do now. But again, it's all about taking the shape of the stone. In this technique, I am going to wrap my fingers around the stone. But it's going to be still pinned to the body, so I don't have to squeeze it. Okay, now there isn't much heat in this stone, so I'm going to go right into showing you what the technique is. It's usually done from an effleurage technique as you're taking the heat out of the stone, and then I'm going to come to the side of the table. I've bent my knees, and my arms are going to be rigid. The palms of my hand are resting on the client's body. It helps stabilize the stone. It forms what I would call a tripod. So I am now in the lamina groove with the stone. I've cupped it. My thumbs are not squeezing it. My thumb is out of the way. My other hand goes on top. I am not squeezing the stone. And by bending my knees, with my arms being rigid, it puts pressure into that stone. Then what I do is I shift my weight onto my front leg. And then I just rock the body nice and slow, pulling the erectors away from the spine. It's a nice, gentle stroke. And again, I release my hand and that stone would fall right out of it because I'm not squeezing it. Now, when I'm working the body in quadrants, that stroke will come out to about the mid-back area where I feel I can't go any further onto my front leg, which is fine. Then I can move my feet because I would start the stroke from about here if I was working on the upper back. And then again, I can rock the body with that stroke. Again, the pressure from the stroke is not coming from my fingers. I'm not doing this. It's stabilized with my hands, and the pressure or the rocking motion comes from my upper back. We want to use the largest muscle groups possible to apply these strokes. Our bodies will last longer if we do that. They will not wear out as quickly. Now, one of the things I've been working with very recently is using ProSage heat. So again, I'm going to take a little bit of the ProSage heat and I'm going to rub it in my hands, which kind of activates the heating properties. And then I'm going to take the stones and I'll place them on the table so I don't have to come back to the heating or drying station for them. When you apply cold to the body, you have to understand that your client might not be their most favorite thing, their most favorite experience. So working with cold stones, you have to apply direct pressure like with the hot stones, but the pace is slow, not fast. The body does not like being cold, but it's a really healing aspect of what we do. And so I will not do this session without doing cold. Okay, when you approach your client, it's going to be both palms up. And you're going to tell them that you're going to be working with cool stones, so it doesn't shock them. And you're going to have them take a deep breath. And during their exhale, you're going to apply the stones to the upper back. You want to take most of the cold out in the upper back because the lower back is much more sensitive to cold. So Angelica, take a deep breath. And exhale. Now I'm applying those stones with quite a bit of pressure. And I'll hold these stones, especially on a client that I might not have worked with before. I want to see how they respond to the cool stones. And I'll wait until they start to relax into the cool, into the temperature that we're working with right now. And then I start to massage the upper back very slowly with the cool stones. And I'll bring them down into the upper traps and just work this area a little bit, nice and slow. Again, I step back from the table so I can lean into my strokes. Okay, now when we want to apply cold to the lower back, we go down the back with our palms up. And again, we want to work with the breath work because your client has a hard time contracting if they're exhaling. And so I'm going to have Angelica take a deep breath, and then during her exhale, I'm going to apply these stones to the lower back. So take a deep breath for me, and exhale. And we press and we hold. Now, depending upon how your client responds to cold is going to dictate the pace in which you can work with it. Angelica didn't seem to have a hard time with that, so I'm just going to come right up the back now with these stones. And I will end with this application. These two cool stones are going to go into her hands, and then I'm going to pick up the two marble stones to do one more application of cold. I'm going to be doing it the exact same way that I did it before, except during this application, I'm going to go down the back with the stones instead of going down with my palms up. Okay, deep breath, and exhale. But I will still massage the upper back first to take some of the initial cool out of these stones. Nice and slow with firm pressure. And then I'm going to flip them and draw them back. We can go out over the scapulas a little bit. Okay, now it's just to be firm pressure. Since she's already received cold once, the misnomer of how cold is going to feel is no longer apparent because she's experienced it already. And again, we just want to pull the heat out of the body that we put in it. We'll also reduce soreness. And it also takes the body out of its norm for a short period of time, which is going to make it stronger because it's going to just have to recover from it. It's like going to the gym. We break down a little bit of muscle tissue to get stronger. We're doing the same thing here, but on a cellular level or a systems level. And I'll go down the back one more time with these. Now when I come back, when I lean back into the stroke now, I still apply pressure because I know that cold stones without pressure can be a little bit shocking on the system. And again, I can go down into the hands and then switch the stones out.